Welcome into the Energy Tech Podcast, where today we're joined by Magnus McCune from HiveMQ. Guys, welcome to the show live at ICC 2025.
Hey, Jeff. Of course, thanks for having us. I am your co-host, Mike Flotis, with the Energy Tech Podcast. And yes, of course, we are live at the inaugural site of ICC 2025 in the heart of Sacramento. And joining me is our guest, Mr. Magnus McCune with HiveMQ. Magnus, great to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Mike. This is a wonderful event and really glad to be here with you in the booth.
Yeah. And so, Magnus, I really want to get our viewers and listeners to really understand who you are and what you do with HiveMQ, how you fit in with the organization. So I want you to share a little bit of that about you, man. It's really important.
Yeah, that sounds great, Mike. So my role at HiveMQ is principal architect in the office of the CTO. And the great thing about that role is it doesn't mean anything.
I like that.
So what I would describe what I do is effectively I work with our customers to push the boundaries of what HiveMQ's products can really do. So one half of my role is working directly with customers and understanding what they're trying to do, what they're trying to achieve, and then how do we push the boundaries of what HiveMQ's current products do in order to make that possible. The second half of my role is really taking that information, taking those insights, taking those learnings from those customers, and bring that back to our product teams and back to our innovative groups at HiveMQ, and saying, hey, how do we better serve these customers? How do we better meet these customers' needs?
I think you bring up something very interesting, and what I heard from that is basically that you work backwards from the problem with customers and clients, which I think is not typical for some companies, but it sounds like HiveMQ is really spot on with doing that with the different clients. If you could say, hey, in HiveMQ, these are the types of verticals that we serve. While HiveMQ does have a great breadth of products, where do you think you fit in so far in verticals?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. So, interestingly, for being at a very manufacturing and industry focused event, really our origin story has a lot to do with automotive, but not just automotive manufacturing, and in fact, automotive connected car solutions. So one of our very first production solutions, this is all the way back in 2012 when the company was founded, was actually working with BMW on their connected car platform. Today we connect, I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head, but more than 50 million vehicles into centralized systems. While MQTT has certainly been used in industry and in fact was born for heavy industry, as I mentioned, our history is more diverse than that. In the last 5 years, I would say manufacturing specifically has become a much greater focus for us. MQTT is the sort of backbone for unified namespace type architectures or design patterns. So that's certainly a reason we've been coming to events like this for the last number of years, and attended Prove It back in February, and again here doing Prove It sessions at the event.
Yeah, and so let's talk about that for a second. One of the themes this year for Ignition is level up, and what has happened, Magnus, is that when I think of Ignition leveling up, they've done that in a few ways. Number one, they've got a brand new venue, which is here to host, end users, integrators, and the HiveMQ, some key partners alike. That's one way. The other way is the release of 8.3, right, with Ignition. A third way is bringing that same Prove It flavor that you were talking about in February. So they've brought that back here, and I think it's been a big part of leveling up. The fourth way is, us, the Energy Tech Podcast. We're here to talk and engage the community and share in a lot of those insights. Having said all that, in your mind, with what for you represents leveling up in terms of HiveMQ and your connection with Ignition?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're actually in active development on some modules for Ignition. Historically, we've absolutely integrated with Ignition via MQTT, but we feel like for some of the direction we're heading next, and I think we can get into that a little bit as we go through, some of the direction of where we're heading next, we really feel like an Ignition module is the right next move for us. So some of that in the works, I won't go into details today, but some of that in the works, talked about it in our Prove It session as well. And then the other big piece is, we're doubling down on, we've been this incredible data movement and data transport platform and data acquisition platform for the last 13 or so years. But we're moving above that a little bit, moving up the stack, if you will, into data context and really setting and understanding the context around data and then deriving insights from that context. So what can we learn by structuring data as a unified namespace or creating an ontology around our data, creating a semantic structure around our data, and really building out those capabilities for us. So it's been a huge leveling up year for us, actually.
So I think that's great. And you alluded to something. You were in Prove It in February, and what were some of the things in February that you think HiveMQ got a takeaway? And you were involved this week, right? So you're involved as well. What do you think you had in common? But what do you think you brought this time for this feel of leveling up at the mini Prove It?
Yeah, absolutely. So, our session in February was actually a pretty large product announcement for us. It was the announcement of our private preview for our new product, HiveMQ Pulse. And this session, we really wanted to focus in on that ignition integration. Bit of a different audience here. I mean, certainly
Right.
there was overlap. But for the audience here this week, we really wanted to focus in on to how we interoperate with with Ignition. And actually, one of the lovely things from the keynote this morning was the talk of scale. And
Right.
HiveMQ's real differentiator is we operate at incredible scales. I mean, truly just unmatched scales. And so one part of my Prove It session yesterday was to talk about how you build a scale-out IoT architecture with HiveMQ that relies on Ignition. So Ignition at the edge, Ignition at the center in the application stack, but HiveMQ is the data backbone, as the actual layer that is sort of reliably and faultlessly moving that data. And so that was a really key emphasis for our session, as well as some technologies around bridging that OT-IT divide and ensuring that data can get reliably into downstream data or upstream data systems, cloud-based data.
Yeah, having said that, you touched on something I think is real important, and that was on scaling. One thing I believe is just because you're growing doesn't mean you're scaling, right? So that's always something that plays in the background for manufacturers, whatever your line of business is, whatever the case is. Having said that, in terms of scaling, two things. Number one is, where do you think, we'll pick on manufacturers. Where do you think they may, I wouldn't say get it wrong or fail, because that maybe that's a bad word, but at some level, there may be a lesson that they need to learn before they begin to scale. What are some of the things or lessons that you've seen over the years or in your role where you believe HiveMQ adds value so that they can capture that mistake or that challenge or that failure early on as they scale?
Yeah. So, HiveMQ, our main protocol that we work with, obviously, is MQTT. That's the bread and butter of everything we do. And there are some really key things in designing how you're going to integrate using MQTT that are really important. So things like choosing a topic structure, things like choosing data formats for payloads, things like choosing QoS and those pieces that certainly can impact at scale. But I think even beyond that is I think we have a natural, as builders, we have a natural habitat, or a natural habit, I should say, of choosing, for example, an open source technology right at the outset, and then we get to a point where that might not scale or that might not have the support elements, and so often that's when our customers start to reach out. Is hey, we built this proof of concept, it exploded in value, overnight, but now we're getting questions on security, we're getting questions on support. And can you help us out with that? And we're huge proponents of open source. I'm a builder myself. That's how I start most projects.
Right.
HiveMQ offers open source technology, but at some point you're going to reach that point where you just can't keep scaling on the foundations of something that doesn't have support. I have a great example actually from a car manufacturer that I worked with last year, who'd built out just truly an incredible, innovative, wonderful platform. And they'd done so on the back of some of the most important open source technologies we have out there. But then we're being faced with, we have to move on to our next project. Who's going to support what we've built over the last 2 years? A lot of it is custom code, custom glue. Who's going to support this for the future? And that's actually why they got in touch with us. Is hey, we need a team behind this. We need an enterprise behind this.
So would you say in something like that, was that, I wouldn't call it a legacy, but would you say that what they did was box themselves in a sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's certainly part of it, and also just having to reinvent the wheel to some degree. I mean, I think a lot of the patterns that our customers are trying to build, hey, I need to integrate this MQTT data into Kafka, or I need to integrate it into, an upstream IT system. They then have to build tooling around that. If they're
Right.
going with a non-enterprise solution, they have to build tooling around that. Whereas it comes out of the box with HiveMQ. So yeah, just end up with. I'll call it tech debt rework required. And if they start with HiveMQ, they don't worry as much about
Yeah, so you brought up a good point. What I heard right now is really, as an organization, it sounds like you work from the backwards from the problem. So you want to understand the problem. It sounds like what HiveMQ is doing is I call it an easy. Well, if I was to break down the version, we're talking about a land and expand, right? Kind of land that, and then work with that client in order to push out some of those things that you uncover. It sounds like uncover some issues, legacy items. They've painted themselves in a corner, while at the same time they're on that common backbone. They solve problems. So it sounds like that's what HiveMQ is doing. Where do you, if I had to put it like that and land and expand, would you say that's the nature of HiveMQ right now? Has it always been in the DNA of the company, the organization, to do something like that?
I would say it's something we're seeing a lot more of right now, I guess. Specifically, as I mentioned, we sort of manufacturing is not necessarily a newer space for us, but it is relatively new. And one of the things we're finding is that specifically, for example, a unified namespace built on the backbone of MQTT, it's a bit of a flywheel of value for our customers. And so, that initial use case, maybe it takes a couple of months to get ramped up. You sort of bring all this data into a unified namespace. It's moving. You have a couple thousand messages a second or whatever it might be, and then suddenly someone else goes, wait, that data is really. Somebody else within your organization goes, oh wait, that data would be really useful to me. But can we add these few tags? Can we bring this data in?
Right.
And next it's, oh, that was really successful at this first site, this first facility. Could we bring that same method of operation to another facility, or could we bring that use case to another facility? And so many of our customers end up with, hey, we thought it was going to solve this problem, and it did very rapidly. But now we're solving all of these other problems, right? I have all these almost downstream consumers of this data who are deriving value from it. So often that flywheel of value ends up with, we thought this was going to be a small use case. Now it's exploded and it's become the backbone for most of what we do.
Wow. So it sounds to me, I guess what I'm hearing is, because you've done that, you've uncovered something. You have downstream consumers that have said, holy smokes, right? We have captured something that we probably otherwise would have never seen, let's say with the naked eye or an analysis or whatever place. You just can't see that. And it sounds like HiveMQ brings that to light. Um, Tell me about that in terms of when someone is unboxing a solution from, and I use the word unbox. In my mind, you think of MQTT, a broker, as this physical thing, right? But sometimes you're unboxing a solution. If you could say, hey, Mike, or to the viewers, hey, if we're unboxing a solution, what does that look like? You know?
Yeah, I mean, if I understand the question, we're talking about sort of how do I get started, or
Yeah.
what does that getting started experience look like? And the answer is very rapid. So whether you're deploying to Kubernetes or you're deploying to VMs or whatever it might be, it's very rapid to get up and running. If we're talking about something like our open source technology, HiveMQ Edge, and our smaller broker technology, that is literally a Docker container. Pull it, I'm up and running. If I've got MQTT clients, I can just point them at that IP address, and I'm ready to go. If we're talking about the enterprise broker, the clustered broker, we've got a Kubernetes operator that allows you to deploy that in many of the same ways, actually, that was talked about in the keynote this morning, using these GitOps patterns to deploy at scale. Those are patterns that are available for HiveMQ Enterprise.
Right.
And once again, from there, once I have those systems up and running and they self-cluster when they identify each other, I'm just pointing at an IP and kicking things off. So very easy self-started experience.
Wow. So, one of the things that you always hear about, so you've got, Magnus, sometimes you have in the middle, you have this operations group, and then you have the business. And there's this spot in between. How do you think HiveMQ fills that spot? Because you've got an operations group that has competing interests, with a leadership group. And then just so often, it doesn't matter if you're in energy, oil and gas, data center, it really doesn't matter. So in your experience, how does HiveMQ handle that challenge in competing interests?
Yeah, I mean, many of the projects we're working on right now have sort of spawned from digital transformation initiatives that are often, right at the crux of that OT, IT or OT business divide, where the OT team is operating very successfully. The IT team is able to do what they want to do, but suddenly we want to move data across those boundaries or move data between those teams. Actually, this is where unified namespace is one, but also just MQTT in general becomes really apt. It's a technology that OT systems are more than happy to integrate with, and IT systems are more than happy to integrate with.
Right.
And then you add, our extension layer and whatever else it might be on top, and suddenly you have a system that can really span not just the physical edge to cloud, but also the sort of OT world across to that IT world, and in a really consistent way, in a way that if I'm a data analyst, I'm ready to consume that data. But if I'm an OT engineer, I understand also how to not only consume but publish data into that system. And so really that's why HiveMQ is finding so much success in the manufacturing spaces. It's a technology that allows us to bridge that OT-IT divide.
Yeah, man, I'm the way you put that is a great example of that. So knowing that, you know, with the product line, if you could say, "Hey, Mike, we have essentially helped out a group there," what does that look like in terms of support coming out of HiveMQ in that same vein?
Yeah, so we obviously have solutions engineering teams that work with our customers when they're first getting started, so sort of pre-sales and during a new opportunity. So those teams would help you out to kind of get that figured out, get that deployed, understand how to how to structure your data and that sort of thing. We also have professionl services teams, and we don't tend to deploy them on every opportunity, but our professional services team is really there to help customers who are looking to do something that's a little bit different or a little bit more complex or something at larger scale. One of my colleagues, Jens, is phenomenal at helping our customers sort of think about how they want to structure their data within their broker architecture. And it's important to keep in mind, we might describe one broker cluster as living centrally, for example, but quite often it's really a constellation of brokers, right?
Yeah.
It's I have something right at the edge, I have something at a site, I have something out in central, and then I'm integrating into downstream systems. And so how do I design, how do I architect that whole system? So that'd be our professional services team. Then of course in-house support 24/7 across time zones.
So it sounds like bundled in, we'll say, as part of that unique team. And you talked about, you just described really what scaling is, right? And in terms of that, how does HiveMQ tackle three main things? And this is what you're going to find whether you're in operations or you're at in the leadership. Three main things: cost, complexity, cybersecurity. It always falls in a bucket like that. And just kind of talk through that with HiveMQ. You've already talked about professional services. I think you already said it, but I just want to be clear that what you're talking about is, hey, Mike, in terms of cost, we offer we typically run a proof of concept, and then you've got complexity. You've got some things that are available, and then cybersecurity probably needs a little addressing.
Yeah, absolutely. So all those three layers are something we absolutely aim to address with our customers. In terms of cost, I mean, we have a fairly flexible costing model depending on what our specific customers need. So all the way from, as I mentioned, open source into commercial brokers of various capacity and that sort of thing, and targeted at different industries. I mean, the needs of, as I mentioned, a connected car company where, I have millions of devices, but not that much message throughput as an example versus,
Stamping parts at sub-millisecond might be one.
Exactly, yeah. And then I have much fewer devices. I have much fewer connections, but I have a much greater number of tags, much greater sort of timeliness requirement. So our pricing is designed to accommodate for those things. So cost is something that, once it's understood with a customer, is fairly predictable for our customers. Beyond that, complexity is the real one. And so we do a very good job, in my opinion, of designing sort of architectures that meet most customers' needs. And then when things go beyond that, I mean, we were talking verticals earlier, and data centers has been a new one for us in the last 2 years. I think it has been for a lot of people here at ICC. For data center use cases, the data is going primarily in one way. We're sending a ton of data up. It also has federation concerns. I mean, some of these customers are looking to share this data with their downstream partners. If I'm a data center operator, I need to share this data out to a number of customers. So there's some data federation or even just data sharing concerns there that need to be architected around. And that's really where we bring in someone like me or someone from our professional services team to have a conversation about what that looks like. We were talking scale earlier, and it's worth noting that scale is exploding right now.
Yeah.
I have one customer, I've been using them as an example this week because they're here at ICC. They did some presentations, but their data volumes are 100xing over the next 5 years.
Wow.
Yeah, so off the top of my head, I'll say maybe 100,000 messages a second is a pretty typical plant for them. 10 million messages a second is what they're looking at in a very near future. Those are complex architectures that are going to require some care and care and feeding, as I like to say.
Yeah.
So that was, and cybersecurity being the last one. So cybersecurity is a great story for us. MQTT as a whole is a secure technology. It uses TLS. It has authentication. We've added on top of that with our enterprise security extension, which really just allows you to flexibly meet your security needs. So whether that's integrating with your IDPs or whether that's integrating with certificate management, we have a number of different ways that we can integrate on the security side. It's also a really lovely story for data movement because unlike other technologies, MQTT fundamentally just requires a one-directional connection.
Correct. Outbound only.
Outbound only, and so for when we're looking at Purdue models or when we're looking at working with our customers around OT security, we're really saying, hey, open up one port and you've got this incredible bidirectional communication channel that really just offers a lot of flexibility.
Right, and anyone will typically push to Purdue and say, hey, I don't know why, but in my mind, we still have to have that DMZ. And it may not be the case because, like you said, naturally, MQTT outbound only on TLS, you've got some really good, you're having that packet do all the work, which is ideal.
Mm-hmm.
Now, having said that, one of the things that I've noticed, especially in data center, is you mentioned something earlier. I think there's some competing forces there. What I mean by that is the data sometimes you have federal or government rules that are now being impacted that are changing. In other words, what might be water cooling and energy, they have a requirement for that data too. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the challenges in data center. The other is that you're getting off-grid partners. Mm-hmm. So what I mean by that is you have, electrical grid. They're starved for power. So they're saying, let's come to a legacy company that typically supplies natural gas, and let's integrate the data that we're streaming. And in some cases with natural gas, it's not sub-millisecond data. This is batch data types that are not the same. I mean, it sounds to me like HiveMQ meets that kind of challenge between that legacy and the newer data sets that are typical of the data center.
Yeah, I mean, so we're certainly seeing a lot of interest in MQTT in that space because of those sort of data volume and data sharing capabilities.
Right.
Prove It here is actually an interesting example in that context. We have 18 vendors, talking cybersecurity, talking connectivity. We have 18 vendors at this event that are all integrating into one broker architecture and doing so in such a way that they consume the data that they're allowed to consume, but can't consume the data they're not supposed to, and they can publish to where they're supposed to and not, and done so very flexibly. Like that wasn't a particularly challenging or complex setup. Data federation in general is a topic I think we're exploring more. I don't know that we've solved all of the data federation challenges that organizations may face, but it's something we're actively working on is understanding how we can best serve that market.
Awesome. Magnus, I would keep you here, but I want to ask you one more thing, and I think this is important. And it's just top of mind for so many people and organizations, and you're seeing a convergence at leadership that want this, and you see operations that say, wait, before we do this, we need to be able to support it. I know you know where I'm going. What is right now the strategy for HiveMQ regarding AI and machine learning initiatives in your verticals?
Absolutely. So, I think one of the really foundational things for us is we provide data pipeline for OT data, and as we build into our new product line, which is HiveMQ Pulse. I'll talk about that in just a moment, actually. That is the foundation for industrial AI data. I mean, it is the pipe that is saturating those channels or bringing those channels online. So whether that's feeding into a data lake and then going through a batch analysis process or whatever it might be, and being inferred from there, or whether it's actually on the streaming data directly, HiveMQ is the backbone for those types of workloads. But that isn't enough for us. So we are investigating some new approaches to that. So how and where do we fit into these spaces? Those are things we're still working on. But what we have that I would encourage all of your listeners to tune into is on October 16th. We have a webinar with Walker Reynolds, actually, where we'll be unveiling our new product called HiveMQ Pulse. And Pulse adds the piece that industrial data needs, which is the context.
Right.
All of this data is incredibly valuable on its own, but unless it's contextualized and normalized and ready to be ingested into the systems, I did a webinar on data and AI a few years ago now, and I think I'd come up with a sentence that was, no data is bad data is worse.
Yes.
And I think that absolutely holds true, which is we just need to ensure that the data that is going into these systems is normalized and contextualized and ready to be consumed. And so our new capabilities around HiveMQ Pulse will meet that need specifically, including building things like ontologies and context graphs that help, semantic graphs that help a large language model or help an AI system actually understand the data and what it does.
In relation to AI and ML, how do you feel HiveMQ? Is it running parallel, or you see a parallel relationship with MCP?
Yeah, I mean, MCP is going to be a key enabler for this industry. I think we're seeing how that will shake out in different spaces. So tool calling and that sort of thing. There were multiple different levels of that we were investigating, from managing the configuration and deployment of our brokers through MCP tools. I think is one. MCP over the data itself is certainly something we're actively investigating, but haven't made any big announcements yet. I would say watch this space is what I would go with.
Yeah, so it sounds like we're looking out, and I heard something key from you, and this is on October the 16th. There is going to be a webinar. In fact, we'll go ahead and grab that if we can at some point, a link. We'll share that.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I think that'll be great. And Magnus, honestly, I would keep you here if I could. We're running out of time, and it was so great to talk to you. There's so much to unpack. We do leverage HiveMQ, and we've seen that it's in action. What a great set of tools, and what an offering by HiveMQ. And I really appreciate you coming on the show, spending some time with us. And again, Magnus McCune with HiveMQ. I am your co-host, Mike Flotis, with the Energy Tech Podcast here in the heart of Sacramento at ICC 2025. Thank you, Magnus. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Mike. This has been fantastic.
Yeah. Awesome.